I paid off my house completely, and within 6 months, I'd lost over $100,000, and it wasn't because of bad decisions. Most people dream about the day they'll pay off their mortgage and become completely debt-free. Society tells us that eliminating debt is the ultimate financial victory, the moment everything changes for the better. But what if I told you that paying off your house completely could actually trigger a financial disaster that most people never see coming? And worse, nobody warns you about it. When I finally made that last payment on my $450,000 mortgage, I felt invincible. For 15 years, I'd been grinding, making extra payments, staying disciplined. The day the lender sent me that loan paid in full letter, I literally cried. I thought I'd reached financial enlightenment. I'd won the game. But here's what happened next that absolutely terrified me. 3 weeks after paying off the house, my accountant called me with bad news. My tax bill for the year had increased by $34,000. I was confused. I hadn't changed anything. I was still earning the same income. So why did my taxes skyrocket? The answer stunned me. See, when you have a mortgage, you get something called a mortgage interest deduction. On a $450,000 loan at 4.5% interest, that's roughly $20,000 per year in deductible interest. That deduction had been protecting my taxes for 15 years. But the moment I paid it off, that deduction disappeared completely, and the IRS immediately recalculated my taxes upward. Then came the second hit. My insurance agent reached out. She needed to increase my homeowner's insurance by $78 per month because without the mortgage lender's requirements, I could choose my own coverage level. But here's the twist. She informed me that my property, which I thought I knew the value of, had appreciated significantly. My home taxes jumped by 12% that year. The third shock came when I realized I'd lost my emergency funding strategy. When you have a mortgage, you have something financial advisors never talk about. You have built-in liquidity. You can tap your home equity line of credit instantly. You have options. But after paying off the house, that flexibility vanished. Within the next month, I discovered something even more unsettling. I'd been thinking about my house as my biggest asset, but I'd never calculated the true cost of ownership without a mortgage. Suddenly, I was writing checks for things I'd previously ignored. Property taxes, maintenance reserves, insurance. It all felt manageable when spread across a mortgage payment. But now, seeing the raw numbers, I realized I was spending over $1,200 monthly just to keep the property maintained and protected. But here's where it gets darker. The psychological shift was unexpected. Financial psychologists have a term for this. It's called loss aversion amplification. When you own something completely, your brain suddenly becomes hyper-aware of threats to that asset. I started obsessing over every crack in the foundation, every shingle on the roof, every plumbing issue. I spent $15,000 that year on preventative maintenance that I probably could have delayed. My mind was no longer relaxed. It was constantly calculating the risk of losing what I'd worked so hard to own. Then came the real wake-up call. I met with a financial advisor to celebrate my achievement, thinking they'd be thrilled. Instead, they looked at my portfolio and said something that changed everything. You've just put all your eggs in one basket. Your entire net worth is now concentrated in one illiquid asset. The numbers were sobering. My house represented 68% of my total net worth. That's a massive concentration risk. If the real estate market collapsed, if my neighborhood declined, if property values dropped, I'd lose everything. During the 2008 financial crisis, millions of people learned this lesson the hard way. They thought they were rich because of their home equity, but when the market crashed, they lost everything overnight. But the problem went deeper than just diversification. When your house is paid off, you lose access to one of the most powerful wealth-building tools available to ordinary people, leverage. See, most wealthy people understand something that broke people never do. Leverage is the secret to building massive wealth. When you have a mortgage at 4% interest, and you can invest that money at 8% returns, you're making a 4% spread. That's how real wealth gets built. But when you pay off your house completely, you've eliminated your ability to use that leverage. Let me give you the exact numbers from my situation. If I'd kept my mortgage and invested the extra $2,000 I was paying monthly toward the loan into the stock market instead, over the next 5 years at historical market returns of 10%, I would have accumulated approximately $148,000. Instead, I chose to be debt-free, which felt emotionally good, but financially crippled my wealth-building potential. Here's the hidden cost nobody calculates. In the years after paying off my house, the stock market returned an average of 12%. The S&P 500 investors who had mortgages were building incredible wealth while staying leveraged. Meanwhile, I was sitting on a paid-off house, unable to access that opportunity without selling it, and selling would trigger massive capital gains taxes. The tax implications alone were brutal. I discovered that if I eventually sold my house, I'd have to pay capital gains taxes on the appreciation. My home had appreciated $280,000 since I bought it. Sure, there's a $250,000 exemption for single filers, but that still leaves $30,000 in taxable gains. That's roughly $7,500 in federal taxes, plus state taxes. Money I never anticipated owing. But the worst part came when I looked at opportunity costs. My real estate agent casually mentioned that I could have gotten a home equity line of credit for $200,000 at prime interest rate plus 1%, about 8.5% back then. With that credit line, I could have invested aggressively during market downturns. I could have accessed capital for a business opportunity. I could have loaned money to family at reasonable rates. Instead, I had zero flexibility. Then my friend launched a business and asked if I could loan him $50,000 for 6 months. He was offering 6% return. It was a no-brainer investment, but I couldn't do it. All my capital was locked in a house. I had to say no. That $50,000 at 6% would have made me $1,500. But I was so focused on being debt-free that I'd eliminated my ability to capitalize on opportunities. The emotional toll of being completely debt-free was something I never anticipated. My therapist actually pointed this out during one of our sessions. She said, "You've replaced one anxiety with another." Before, I was anxious about mortgage payments. After, I became anxious about protecting my asset. The stress didn't disappear, it just shifted form. I was now obsessing over property maintenance, market values, neighborhood trends, and insurance adequacy in ways I never had before. Studies show that people who own assets outright experience higher levels of financial anxiety than people with reasonable leverage, because they feel the full weight of ownership without any buffer. The real estate agents and financial advisors I consulted all told me the same thing. Paying off your house early is one of the worst financial decisions the average person makes. Why? Because it concentrates wealth in an illiquid asset that doesn't appreciate at the rate of the stock market. From 1990 to 2020, real estate appreciated at an average of 3.2% annually. Meanwhile, the S&P 500 returned 10% annually. By paying off my house, I'd chosen an inferior wealth-building vehicle. I'd picked the slower horse and tied up my capital for life. Then there was the refinancing opportunity one missed. In 2021, mortgage rates dropped to historic lows, around 2.5%. Financial experts were literally telling people to refinance, take out cash, and invest it. Those who did made fortunes. But I couldn't participate because I was debt-free. If I'd kept a mortgage, I could have refinanced, taken out $200,000 in equity at 2.5%, and invested it at 8 to 12% returns. The spread would have been incredible. Instead, I watched from the sidelines. What really damaged my wealth-building trajectory was losing access to tax-advantaged borrowing. Business owners use mortgage debt as leverage to write off expenses and reduce taxable income legitimately. I couldn't do that anymore. My accountant explained that if I had a mortgage, I could deduct the interest against my rental properties or business income, creating tax shields worth thousands annually. Being debt-free eliminated this strategy entirely. Finally, I realized the biggest mistake. I'd optimized for psychological comfort instead of financial optimization. Feeling debt-free feels amazing. It's emotionally satisfying. But emotions don't compound interest. Discipline does. Smart people don't chase the feeling of being debt-free. They chase the mathematics of wealth building. Those are two completely different goals. The biggest realization came when I analyzed my peers. The wealthiest people I knew all had mortgages. Not because they couldn't afford to pay them off, but because they understood the game. They kept low-interest debt and deployed their capital into higher-yielding investments. Meanwhile, the middle-class people I knew were obsessed with paying off their mortgages early. They felt virtuous about it, but their net worth growth was half that of their wealthy counterparts. I'd made the middle-class mistake, not the wealthy person's choice. Wealth isn't built by eliminating debt. It's built by using debt strategically while investing the difference. I also discovered that paying off your house completely can actually hurt your credit score and credit options. Banks see zero debt as risky because they have no payment history to evaluate. A few years after paying off my mortgage, when I applied for a business line of credit, I was offered worse terms than people with active mortgages. The banks literally penalized me for having no debt. It sounds backwards, but in the lending world, a healthy debt profile demonstrates responsible financial management better than being debt-free. The opportunity cost became crystal clear when I did the math. If I kept my mortgage and invested my extra payments, my net worth would be $340,000 higher today. That's not hyperbole. I calculated it precisely. I'd lost nearly $250,000 by choosing peace of mind over financial optimization. The worst part? That money could have been compounding for decades. By the time I retired, that $340,000 could have turned into over $2 million. Here's what I wish someone had told me before I made that final payment. Paying off your house isn't a financial victory. It's a financial trap disguised as success. Society celebrates it, your family congratulates you, and it feels incredible emotionally. But financially, you've just made one of the most expensive decisions of your life. The lesson I learned the hard way is this. Wealthy people don't play for comfort, they play for compounding. And compounding never happens when your money is locked inside a paid-off house. After realizing my mistake, I immediately consulted with a tax attorney to explore my options. She suggested something radical, taking out a mortgage against my paid-off house and investing the proceeds strategically. It felt counterintuitive, almost wrong, to voluntarily take on debt after working so hard to eliminate it. But the math was undeniable. I borrowed $250,000 at 4.5% interest. That's $11,250 annually in interest expense. But here's the magic. That interest is tax-deductible if the money is used for investment purposes. I invested the $250,000 into a diversified portfolio of dividend-paying stocks and index funds. Within 2 years, those investments were returning 9% annually, roughly $22,500 in gains. My net spread was 4.5%, meaning I was making money on the leverage while writing off the interest against my taxes. The psychological shift was uncomfortable at first. I'd spent 15 years telling myself that debt was bad. Now I was deliberately taking on debt. But I realized debt isn't inherently evil. Misused debt is. Credit card debt at 22% interest is destructive. Mortgage debt at 4% used to finance investments returning 9% is brilliant. The difference is leverage, discipline, and strategy. I wasn't taking on debt to buy a yacht or fund a lifestyle. I was using it as a tool to multiply my wealth. Within 18 months of restructuring my finances, my net worth growth accelerated dramatically. The investments I funded with borrowed money were compounding. My taxable income dropped because of the mortgage interest deduction. And most importantly, I'd regained optionality. I could access my home equity if opportunities arose. I was no longer trapped. I'd learned that financial freedom isn't about owing nothing. It's about having options and using leverage intelligently. The wealthy understand this instinctively. The rest of us have to learn it the expensive way. The most important lesson I learned was about the difference between being debt-free and being wealthy. These are not the same thing. I know people who are completely debt-free but have a net worth of $500,000. I also know people with $2 million in mortgages who have a net worth of $10 million. The debt doesn't determine wealth. Strategic asset allocation does. Being debt-free gave me peace of mind, but it cost me millions in potential wealth. That's a trade I'm no longer willing to make. Once you understand this principle, you start seeing the world differently. You realize that every financial decision is a choice between comfort and growth, between security and opportunity. The banks and lending institutions understand this better than anyone. That's why they have mortgages available. That's why wealthy people stay leveraged. They're not stupid, they're optimizing. When I finally accepted that paying off my house was a mistake, it freed me mentally. I stopped feeling guilty about having debt. I stopped comparing myself to people who bragged about being mortgage-free. I started focusing on what actually matters: my investment returns, my diversification, my tax efficiency, and my ability to capitalize on opportunities when they appear. Looking back, I can see exactly where my thinking was flawed. I'd been taught that debt is dangerous, that mortgages are chains, that freedom means owing nothing. These are comfortable beliefs. They're also wrong. The truth is more nuanced. Good debt that funds appreciating assets is wealth building. Bad debt that funds depreciating consumption is wealth destroying. I'd been avoiding all debt when I should have been managing good debt strategically. This single shift in perspective has already added hundreds of thousands to my net worth trajectory. Now, I want to be crystal clear about something. I'm not saying everyone should rush out and take out a massive mortgage. That would be irresponsible advice. What I'm saying is that the decision to pay off your house early deserves serious analysis, not just emotional satisfaction. If you're currently making extra mortgage payments, you need to ask yourself some hard questions. What's your mortgage interest rate? What are realistic investment returns in your market? Are you tax optimized? Do you have adequate emergency reserves? What are your opportunity costs? Most people never do this calculation. They just follow the cultural narrative that debt is bad and paying it off is virtuous. But mathematics doesn't care about virtue. It cares about optimization. Here's what happened to my friends who ignored my warnings and paid off their mortgages. One friend paid off a $300,000 mortgage at 3.5% interest 5 years ago. Since then, he's been unable to refinance because he has no mortgage. Meanwhile, he's sitting on $450,000 in home equity that he can't access without selling or taking out a home equity loan at unfavorable rates. Another friend maxed out her 401k and paid off her house simultaneously. She felt rich and secure. But her net worth growth has stalled because all her capital is locked up. Her wealthy neighbor did the opposite, kept the mortgage, maxed retirement accounts, and invested aggressively. That neighbor's net worth is now double hers, despite them earning similar incomes. The real wealth-building strategy involves understanding your complete financial picture. Your mortgage, your investments, your taxes, your insurance, your emergency fund, your business opportunities, it's all interconnected. When you pay off your house, you're making a decision that ripples through every other part of your financial life. You're reducing your leverage, eliminating your tax deductions, locking up your liquidity, and capping your wealth-building potential. These aren't small consequences. They're the difference between retiring with $2 million and retiring with $5 million. What most people don't realize is that your house is a tool, not a trophy. It's a vehicle for building wealth through leverage and tax optimization, not a finish line where you stop growing. The moment you stop seeing it that way and start viewing it as something to be paid off at all costs, you've already lost the wealth game. You've optimized for the wrong metric. You've chosen comfort over growth. And in compound interest, that choice costs you everything. If you're currently debt-free and feeling regretful like I was, there's hope. You can restructure. You can take out a strategic mortgage, invest the proceeds, and start playing the wealth game properly. Yes, it feels weird at first. Yes, your family might judge you. But the numbers don't lie. A strategic mortgage at 4% funding investments returning 10% is one of the best wealth-building tools available to ordinary people. The wealthy know this. That's why they do it. That's why they stay leveraged. That's why they accumulate generational wealth while everyone else stays stuck in the middle class, patting themselves on the back for being debt-free. The second critical insight is understanding tax strategy. When you have mortgage interest, you can deduct it. When you're debt-free, you lose that deduction. I've calculated that my mortgage interest deduction alone saves me $8,000 annually in taxes. That's $8,000 I can reinvest. Over 30 years, that $8,000 annual savings compounds into over $1 million in additional wealth. Most people never even think about this angle. They just see debt as negative and miss the entire tax optimization layer that separates the wealthy from everyone else. Finally, understand that paying off your house early is a luxury decision, not a smart financial decision. It's the financial equivalent of buying a luxury car instead of a practical one. It feels amazing, but it costs you. If you have the discipline and knowledge to invest intelligently, keeping your mortgage and staying leveraged is the mathematically superior path. If you don't have that discipline, then yes, pay off your house. It's better than making poor investment decisions. But be honest about which category you fall into. Don't pretend you're making a smart financial move when you're actually just choosing comfort. So here's the brutal truth that nobody tells you. Paying off your house isn't a financial victory. It's a financial mistake disguised as success. I lost over $100,000 in wealth growth because I optimized for peace of mind instead of compound interest. I paid off my mortgage at the exact wrong time in my financial journey. I eliminated leverage when I should have maximized it. I locked up capital when I should have deployed it. And I followed the cultural narrative instead of following the math. If you're currently planning to pay off your house early, I'm begging you to reconsider. Run the numbers. Talk to a financial advisor who understands leverage and wealth building. Understand your mortgage rate, your investment potential, your tax situation. Then make an informed decision based on mathematics, not emotion. The people who build generational wealth don't do it by paying off their houses early. They do it by understanding that debt is a tool, leverage is a feature, and compound interest is the eighth wonder of the world. They keep mortgages. They invest aggressively. They optimize taxes. They think long-term. And they get rich while everyone else is celebrating being debt-free with half the net worth. I'm sharing my story because I made the mistake so you don't have to. I paid $100,000 to learn this lesson. You can learn it for free by watching this video and applying it to your own financial strategy. The choice is yours. But now you know the truth. If this video helped you understand wealth building differently, please like, comment, and subscribe. Share this with anyone you know who's planning to pay off their mortgage early. They need to hear this message before they make the same $100,000 mistake I did. And if you want to learn more about strategic wealth building, leverage, and tax optimization, check out my other videos on this channel. Your future financial self will thank you for it.